I can still remember the exact moment when everything inside me shifted. When the walls of the life I thought I had built came crumbling down like they were made of cheap cardboard. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies make it look, with screaming and broken glass, at least not at first. It was quieter than that, almost too quiet. A silence that pressed down on me so heavily I could barely breathe. I think that's why it still haunts me, because I didn't see it coming. Not like that. But maybe, if I'm being honest. The signs were always there, just scattered like puzzle pieces I didn't bother putting together. Back then, I was 38, living in a suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. A simple life, a predictable one. I worked as an IT project manager for a mid-sized firm downtown. Not glamorous, but steady. The kind of job where you get up at 6:30, fight through traffic on I-70, and hope to beat the rush at Starbucks before logging into your endless cascade of Zoom meetings. My wife, Emily, taught English at the local high school. She was 36, whip-smart, with that sharp kind of wit that could cut you down and make you laugh all in the same breath. We had been married for 12 years, together for nearly 15, and for most of it, I thought we were happy, or at least stable. Our daughter Sophie was 10 at the time. A curious, thoughtful kid who loved drawing anime characters and playing Minecraft. She had this way of asking questions that made me stop and think, questions that seemed too wise for her age. Like when she once asked me why adults say they're fine when they're clearly not. I laughed it off at the time, but looking back, maybe she noticed cracks before I did. Our house sat on a quiet street, lined with maple trees that exploded into reds and oranges every fall. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. A mortgage that didn't crush us, 2 cars in the driveway, yearly family trips to places like Myrtle Beach or the Smoky Mountains. The kind of life my parents would have called the American dream. And maybe that's why I ignored the unease that sometimes sat in the pit of my stomach. Because how could something be wrong when everything looked so right? The first time I noticed something different about Emily, it was small. It was early 2021, just after Christmas. The pandemic was still reshaping everything: remote work, online classes, the whole world feeling fragile. Emily had always been diligent with her grading, but suddenly she seemed distracted. She'd spend long stretches in the bedroom, door half closed, phone in hand. And when I'd walk by, she'd tilt the screen away. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was texting her sister. Maybe she was just decompressing. Everyone needed more space than usual in those months of uncertainty. But the little things started adding up. She laughed at her phone in ways she didn't laugh with me anymore. She started dressing differently, nicer blouses for school. A touch of perfume, even though half the students weren't back in classrooms yet. She joined a teacher support group on Facebook, or at least that's what she told me. And while she'd always been social, always had plenty of friends, there was a new energy in her, like she was carrying around a secret glow. I tried to brush it off. God, I tried. Because the alternative felt too dangerous to even consider. I buried myself in work deadlines, in helping Sophie with her math homework, in shoveling snow off the driveway when Ohio dumped it in buckets that February. But there was this one night late February, cold enough that the windows iced over, when I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering why Emily's body next to me felt a million miles away. She wasn't cold, not exactly, but there was a barrier, invisible yet solid. Between us, I thought back to when we first met. Spring of 2006. I was 21, just out of college. Still living with roommates in a rundown duplex that smelled like stale pizza. She was 20, a junior at Ohio State, waiting tables at the same bar where my buddies and I went every Thursday. I fell for her laugh before I fell for her face. She laughed with her whole body, shoulders shaking, eyes crinkling. And when she finally gave me her number, I felt like I had won something big. We built a life on that laugh. Through grad school, through our tiny starter apartment, through the sleepless nights of Sophie's baby years, that laugh had been the soundtrack. But lately, it wasn't mine anymore. March came, and with it, Emily's birthday. I planned a quiet dinner, ordered a cake from her favorite bakery, even bought her the Kate Spade bag she'd mentioned offhand a few weeks earlier. She smiled, thanked me, kissed my cheek, but her eyes seemed elsewhere, distant. After Sophie went to bed, I suggested we watch one of the old shows we used to binge together at the office, or Parks and Rec. But she said she was tired, that she had papers to grade. She disappeared into the bedroom again, and I sat alone in the living room. Staring at the flickering light of the TV I never turned on, around that time I noticed something else, a name. It came up casually, almost too casually. Mark. She mentioned him once in a story about school. Something about a new teacher in the history department. Then again, in passing, about how funny his jokes were in the staff room. And then again, about how he was such a great addition to the team. Always Mark. Always with a little spark in her voice. I didn't jump to conclusions. At least not out loud. Inside, though, my chest tightened every time I heard his name. I Googled the school's faculty page one night when Emily was asleep, scrolling until I found him. Mark Turner, 39. Taught U.S. history. His picture was one of those stiff, professional headshots. But even there I could see it, the easy smile, the confident posture. He looked like the kind of guy who knew he was liked, the kind who'd always had things come easy. I closed my laptop and told myself I was being paranoid. That was March. By April, things between Emily and me were strained in ways I couldn't explain. We fought over stupid things: laundry, groceries, whether I was spending too much time at work. Fights that weren't really about what we said they were about. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own house, careful not to upset some invisible balance. And all the while, she was somewhere else. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she checked her phone under the table, in the way she smiled at nothing when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, early May, I came home later than usual. A project deadline had kept me at the office until nearly 9. When I walked through the door, I expected to see her grading papers or watching Netflix with Sophie. Instead, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Emily's car was in the driveway. Sophie was asleep upstairs, but Emily wasn't in the living room or kitchen. I found her in the backyard, phone pressed to her ear, pacing under the glow of the patio lights. She didn't see me at first, and for a split second, I caught at the softness in her voice, the way she smiled into the darkness, the way her whole body leaned into the conversation. When she noticed me, she flinched, ended the call quickly, and said it was her sister. But her sister's laugh didn't sound like that. That was the first real crack. The moment I couldn't ignore, I wanted to confront her right then, demand answers, but I froze. Maybe out of fear of being right. Maybe because I didn't know what I'd do if she admitted it. Instead, I mumbled something about being tired, kissed her forehead like a stranger, and went upstairs. I lay awake that night, the silence pressing down again, heavier than ever. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of everything. The way she angled her phone away from me, the way she suddenly had late meetings that never existed before, the way she started wearing that perfume I hadn't smelled in years. I even checked our phone bill one night, something I'd never done before. And there it was, his number. Over and over. Morning, lunch, late at night. Hours of conversations. I told myself maybe it was still innocent, that maybe she just needed a friend, someone who understood her stress. Teachers had been through hell during the pandemic. Maybe this was just her coping. But in my gut, I knew by June I was unraveling inside. Work felt meaningless. Food tasted bland. Even Sophie noticed, asking me why I seemed sad all the time. I told her I was just tired, but the truth was, I felt like a ghost in my own life. Walking through rooms that used to feel warm but now felt cold and hollow. And yet, I still clung to hope. Because love makes fools out of us. Because admitting the truth felt like setting fire to everything I'd ever known. That summer, Emily suggested we take a family trip, just the three of us. To the Outer Banks. She said it would be good for us. A chance to reconnect after a stressful year. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe it. The trip was beautiful in its Y-sand between our toes. Sophie building castles. Emily laughing as the waves chased her ankles. But even there I felt it. The way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her smile dimmed when she returned from just checking in with work. One night, after Sophie was asleep in the hotel bed, I asked Emily if she was happy. The question slipped out before I could stop it. She looked at me for a long time, eyes unreadable, and finally said, "Of course. Aren't you?" I nodded, but my chest ached, because I wasn't. Not anymore. Looking back, that was the calm before the storm. The part of the movie where you know something's about to break, but you can't look away. And the storm? Well, it came faster and harder than I ever could have prepared for. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with one sentence. One small moment when Emily made a choice in front of me, and suddenly everything clicked into place. It was August 14th, 2021. I remember because it was a Saturday. One of those sticky late summer days in Ohio where the air feels heavy enough to drown in. Sophie had a sleepover at her friend Mia's house, so for the first time in a while, it was just me and Emily at home. I thought maybe it would be a chance for us to reconnect, just the two of us. I even suggested grilling out back, making steaks the way we used to when we were newlyweds. Drinking cheap wine on the patio while the cicadas screamed in the trees, she agreed, but half-heartedly. The kind of sure that carried no real weight. I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. I went out, bought Rabai's corn on the cob, even that bottle of Cabernet she always said was her favorite. I wanted it to feel like us again, like before, but when we sat down to eat, she barely touched her plate. She kept her phone face down beside her, glancing at it every few minutes, her shoulders tightening with each vibration. Finally, she excused herself, said she had to take a call from school stuff. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the months of quiet suspicion, but I followed her. I stepped out into the hallway, just far enough to hear her voice through the cracked bathroom door, and I heard his name. Mark. She whispered it like a secret, her tone soft, almost tender. My chest tightened, but I didn't storm in. Not yet. Instead, I walked back to the dining room, sat at the table, and stared at the untouched steak growing cold on her plate. I think I was in shock or denial or both. When she came back, I asked her casual, trying to keep my voice steady if everything was okay. She said yes, just work stuff, nothing serious. I nodded, but my blood was boiling. Later that night, she left her phone on the nightstand when she went to shower. My hands shook as I picked it up. I knew it was wrong, invasive, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened her messages, and there it was, a thread with Mark. Hundreds of texts. Late-night confessions, inside jokes, good morning messages. Nothing outright sexual in what I saw, but intimate in a way that cut me deeper than any physical act could have. She told him things she hadn't told me in years about her dreams, her frustrations, even silly little thoughts about books she was reading. She called him her safe place. My vision blurred. I put the phone down before I read any more, before I lost the ability to breathe. When Emily came back into the room, towel wrapped around her, humming like nothing was wrong, I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I lay there in silence, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. For the next 2 weeks, I carried that knowledge like a live wire in my chest. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I'd sit at work, staring at spreadsheets, hearing her words echo in my head. You're my safe place. But she hadn't been saying it to me. Finally, the breaking point came not from me confronting her, but from her defending him. It was a Sunday afternoon. August 29th. We were at her parents' house for a barbecue. Something we did a few times every summer. Her dad was flipping burgers on the grill, her mom setting out paper plates, cousins running around the backyard. It should have been normal, comfortable. But then, somehow, Mark's name came up. Emily's sister mentioned that the new history teacher at Emily's school was already popular with the students. Mark Turner, right? The kids all say he's their favorite. Emily lit up. I swear, she lit up like she'd swallowed sunlight. She went on about how talented he was, how dedicated, how he'd been such a support to her during tough times. She spoke about him with this fire, this passion, like he was some kind of hero. And when her brother-in-law jokingly said something like, "Careful, Emily, you sound like you've got a crush," She didn't even laugh it off. She bristled. She got defensive. She snapped, saying, "Don't say that. He's an amazing person, and you don't know what he's done for me." That was the moment. She defended him like her life depended on it, and I knew. I knew it was real. This wasn't some harmless work friendship. This wasn't in my head. My wife was in love with someone else. No, she didn't even care how obvious it looked. I don't remember much of the rest of that barbecue. Just the clinking of plates, the smell of smoke, the sound of laughter that felt a million miles away. I sat there, numb, while Emily went on and on about how misunderstood Mark was, how people judged him unfairly. I wanted to scream, to flip the damn picnic table, to expose her right there in front of her whole family. But instead, I just sat. That night, when we got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I didn't ask if she was cheating. I told her I knew. I told her I saw the messages. I told her I could see it in her eyes every time she said his name. She didn't deny it. She didn't even cry. She just went quiet. Then, after what felt like hours, she admitted they had been close. That he was someone she could talk to when she felt like I wasn't listening. She swore it wasn't physical, swore it was just emotional, but her voice wavered, and I didn't believe her. Not really. I asked her if she loved him, and she didn't answer. That silence was worse than any words she could have said. The weeks after that were hell. I tried to go about life as normal for Sophie's sake, but inside, I was falling apart. Emily and I argued constantly behind closed doors. She said I was smothering her, that I was overreacting, that I hadn't paid attention to her for years. Maybe some of that was true. Marriage wears you down. Life gets busy. But nothing could justify what she had done, what she was still doing. The worst part was the gaslighting. She acted like I was crazy, like I had imagined the intimacy in those texts. She insisted they were just friends, that I was insecure, that I needed therapy. And for a while, I almost believed her. I almost thought maybe I was losing my mind. But then, there were the nights she didn't come home right away. The mornings, she left earlier than necessary. The perfume I smelled on her even when she claimed she'd been working late at school. I started checking her location on the family sharing app. Sometimes she was where she said she'd be. Sometimes she'll want. One night, September 18th. I drove past the school parking lot around 9 p.m. Her car was there. His was too. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, staring at those two vehicles side by side in the dark. I didn't go in. I didn't want to see what I already knew. Instead, I drove home, sat in the driveway, and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. That was the real breaking point. Not the texts, not the barbecue. But that moment in the parking lot when I realized she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. After that, I stopped being the same man. I stopped sleeping in our bed, started crashing on the couch. I went through the motions for Sophie, but inside I was shattered. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw a stranger. Every time she spoke, all I heard were the echoes of her whispering his name. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. If anything, she seemed resentful. Like I was the problem for noticing, for daring to care. She kept defending him, kept insisting he was just her friend, kept painting me as some jealous, paranoid husband. But deep down, I knew the truth, and once you know, you can't unknow. That was the summer my marriage died. Fallout isn't a single explosion. It's the lingering haze that hangs in the air after the blast, choking you slowly, day after day. That's what it felt like in the months after I confronted Emily, like I was walking through smoke, coughing but unable to find clean air. On the outside, we pretended things were fine. We still went to Sophie's soccer games on Saturday mornings, still smiled for pictures at her school events, still sat side by side at church when her parents were there. But behind closed doors, everything had changed. I stopped touching her. She stopped looking at me. The silence between us was louder than any argument. The first week after I confronted her, I thought maybe she'd break down, maybe she'd apologize, maybe she'd beg for forgiveness. That's what happens in movies, right? The guilty party confesses, promises to change, And then there's a long, hard road back to love. But that never came. Instead, Emily doubled down. She insisted I was blowing things out of proportion, that nothing inappropriate had happened, and that I was destroying our family with my paranoia. But if it was innocent, why hide it? Why lie about phone calls? Why stay late at school when she didn't need to? I couldn't stop myself from investigating. I checked her phone whenever I could, though she got better at locking it down. I scrolled through our phone bill again and again, seeing his number pop up like a curse I couldn't escape. I even drove past his house once. A modest ranch-style place on the other side of town with a blue pickup in the driveway. I sat there in my car, feeling like some kind of deranged stalker, and wondered if my wife was inside. It ate at me. My work performance slipped. I started missing deadlines, zoning out during meetings. My boss, Michael, pulled me aside one afternoon in late September and asked if everything was okay. I lied, said I was just tired, that the pandemic stress was catching up. But really, my mind was always elsewhere. Always on her. Always on him at home. The tension was unbearable. I slept on the couch more often than not, telling Sophie it was because I snored too loudly. She didn't buy it. Kids know more than we give them credit for. One night, she crawled onto the couch with me, curled up in my arms, and asked if Mommy and Daddy were mad at each other. My throat tightened, but I told her no, that we just needed space. She nodded, but the look in her eyes confused. Scared broke me in ways Emily's betrayal hadn't yet. October rolled in with gray skies and cold winds, and so did the depression. I didn't want to eat. Didn't want to get out of bed. I drank more than I should have bourbon late at night, sitting in the dark living room, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head like a highlight reel gone wrong. I thought about our wedding in 2009, standing in that little church with my hands trembling as I slid the ring on her finger. I thought about the night Sophie was born, the way Emily's face softened when she held her for the first time. I thought about lazy Sunday mornings, about road trips, about all the small, stupid things that used to mean everything. Had it all been a lie? Or had something shifted along the way, so slowly I hadn't noticed until it was too late? I tried counseling. I suggested it one evening after dinner, my voice shaking, my hands clammy. Emily rolled her eyes, said therapy was a waste of money, that we didn't need a stranger telling us how to live. I begged her, told her we had to at least try for Sophie's sake. Eventually, she agreed, reluctantly. We went to 3 sessions. 3, the counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Ellis, asked us to share how we felt, what we needed from each other. I poured my heart out, told Emily I felt abandoned, betrayed, invisible. Emily sat with her arms crossed, lips pressed tight, as if she were being forced to endure some kind of punishment. When Dr. Ellis gently asked her if there was someone else, Emily snapped. Said she was sick of being interrogated, sick of me playing the victim. She stormed out halfway through the 3rd session. That was the end of counseling. From then on, it was survival. Some days I thought maybe we could keep limping along, coexisting in the same house for Sophie's sake. Other days I thought about divorce, about packing a bag and walking out. But the thought of splitting custody, of not seeing Sophie every day, paralyzed me. I couldn't imagine waking up in an empty apartment, only seeing my daughter every other weekend. So I stayed. Meanwhile, Emily grew bolder. She stopped hiding her late nights. She stopped offering excuses. Once, in early November, she came home at nearly midnight, hair tousled, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked where she'd been, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "At school," as if I were too stupid to see through it. I didn't even argue. I just turned away, went to the couch, and lay there staring at the ceiling until dawn. That Thanksgiving was the loneliest holiday of my life. We went to her parents' house again, tried to put on the act, but it was hollow. Emily chatted and laughed like everything was fine, but every time she looked at her phone, my stomach twisted. Her dad asked me how work was going, and I lied, said things were busy but good. Meanwhile, all I could think about was how I was sitting at a table full of people who didn't know their daughter was tearing our marriage apart from the inside. By December, I was a shell of myself. I lost 15 pounds. My coworkers whispered about how pale I looked, how I seemed distracted. Sophie's teacher even called me in for a meeting, saying she was worried about Sophie's mood in class. That gutted me. Because no matter how hard I tried to shield her, my daughter was being dragged into the fallout. Christmas should have been a reprieve, but it wasn't. We went through the motions tree. Presents, stockings, but the joy was gone. Emily gave me a sweater I didn't need. I gave her a necklace she barely looked at. Sophie tore open her gifts with forced excitement, glancing between us like she was trying to will us back together. New Year's Eve, 2021, I sat on the porch at midnight, watching fireworks explode in the distance, while Emily was inside. Texting someone? I didn't even have to ask who. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my life now. Living with a ghost, married to a stranger. January didn't bring change. If anything, it made things worse. Mark was still in the picture more than ever. I overheard Emily on the phone with him one night, her voice low, intimate. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The tone said it all. I started withdrawing from everyone. Friends invited me out to watch football to grab beers, and I always declined. My mom called, worried about me, and I lied, said everything was fine. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. Couldn't bear to hear the disappointment in her voice. But the hardest part was Sophie. She kept asking why Mommy and Daddy didn't hug anymore. Why we didn't laugh like we used to. Why Daddy was always tired. I tried to hide my tears from her, but kids see more than you think. By February 2022, something inside me had broken completely. I remember one night sitting in my car in a Walmart parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, thinking about just driving and not stopping. Not going home. Not facing it anymore. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Good night, Daddy, I love you. 10 words. 10 words that pulled me back from the edge. I went home that night, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I was drowning. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since high school. Late at night, I'd write down everything I couldn't say out loud. The rage, the grief, the way I felt like less of a man, less of a husband. The way I hated Emily and loved her at the same time, which was its own kind of torture. Some nights, I fantasized about exposing her, about calling her parents, her friends, even her school principal, and telling them the truth, about showing them the messages, the proof. But I never did. Maybe because I still loved her. Maybe because I didn't want Sophie to see me as the villain, but the more I wrote, the more I realized I couldn't just sit in the fallout forever. Something had to change. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to reach a point where anger would finally outweigh fear, where I'd stop being the passive victim and start taking action. Because living in the rubble wasn't living at all. Turning the tables didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like the first light of dawn creeping over a city skyline. It started with small things, tiny acts of reclaiming my life that slowly built into something stronger. Something I could hold on to. I began with myself. I joined a gym in February 2022, a little place tucked behind a strip mall, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of sweat and rubber mats thick in the air. At first, it was just to get out of the house, to occupy my mind, but soon it became something more. The clanging of weights, the rhythm of my feet on the treadmill, the sting of lactic acid in my legs. It reminded me that I still existed outside of Emily's shadow. Outside of the betrayal that had suffocated me for months. I looked in the mirror during my workouts and started seeing a man who could survive this, who could endure, who could fight back. I also started documenting everything. Not for revenge initially, but to reclaim a sense of control. I saved texts, screenshots, phone records, timestamps, the subtle lies she told when she thought I wasn't listening. Every note, every email, every slip of truth became a thread I could hold on to. A thread that reminded me she wasn't untouchable. The next step was confronting her, but on my terms. In March, I asked her to sit down, just the two of us, and we did it in the living room after Sophie had gone to bed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stayed calm, deliberately calm, like a dam holding back a river. I told her I knew she had someone else in her life. I told her I had evidence. I told her I was done living in the shadow of a lie. She tried to argue. She tried to manipulate me, to twist words, to claim innocence. But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't doubt myself. I'd spent months preparing for this moment mentally. I had rehearsed every word, every response, every counter to her gaslighting. And for the first time, I felt powerful. Emily didn't have an answer. Not a real one. I could see it in the way her eyes darted, the tremor in her hands, the small sighs she tried to mask. She realized she had underestimated me. That night, I slept on the couch again, but it felt different. Not like defeat, not like surrender. It felt like the calm before action, like a soldier planning the next move after surviving a battle. In April, I took the next step. I talked to a lawyer. I wasn't ready to file for divorce yet, but I needed to know my options. I needed a plan. Sitting in that office, listening to the attorney outline custody arrangements, division of assets, legal rights, I felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Fear because I didn't want to destroy my family. Relief because I realized I could protect myself and Sophie. Meanwhile, Emily's behavior started to slip even more. She became careless, overconfident. She didn't realize I was paying attention, taking notes, building a case. She texted him during the day, left her social media open when she thought I was out. Even mentioned him casually in conversation, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I did notice. Every time I logged it, saved it. Filed it away mentally for later. I also started taking care of Sophie in ways I hadn't before. I cooked breakfast for her on weekdays, helped with homework, attended parent-teacher conferences solo. She was a bright spot in the chaos, a reminder of what mattered. And slowly, I realized that I wasn't just surviving this betrayal, was starting to reclaim my life. Then came the moment I knew I had the upper hand. It was late May 2022. I had discovered that Emily had been planning to meet him at a hotel under the pretense of a work conference. I had learned this through a combination of careful observation, subtle questioning, and yes, her own arrogance. She thought she was clever. She wasn't. I didn't confront her in the moment. Instead, I waited. I watched. I planned. The night she left, I stayed home, pretending to be asleep. I had already installed a discreet camera system months before. Under the guise of home security, I watched the footage as she walked through the door hours later. Flushed and distracted, whispering on the phone. I saw him get out of a car across the street, slip inside with her, and I watched, frozen, as the betrayal I had only suspected became undeniable proof. It was sickening, heart-wrenching, and yet liberating. Because now I had the truth. Not some shadow, not a suspicion, not a hunch. Proof. I didn't immediately show it to anyone. Not her, not family. I didn't even show it to friends. This was mine, my leverage, my reality to process. But I started formulating the next stage. The stage where I would reclaim my dignity, my life, and Sophie's stability. I started thinking about consequences. Not just legal ones, though they were part of it, but social, emotional, and psychological consequences too. I wanted her to understand that actions have weight, that she couldn't just walk through my life, take pieces of it, and leave destruction in her wake. By June 2022, I had made my move. I confronted her again, this time armed with the footage timestamps and a calm resolve that shocked even me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply showed her. Played the footage. Let the evidence speak for itself. She froze. I saw her face turn pale, her lips parting, eyes wide. For once she had no words, no defense. She couldn't gaslight me. Couldn't twist reality. The proof was undeniable. I can't believe you, she whispered finally. But it was hollow. I told her what I planned next. I wasn't going to escalate immediately, not in court, not publicly. I told her that she had a chance to do the right thing for Sophie, for herself, for our family. I told her that if she didn't, the truth would eventually come out. And she would be held accountable. After that night, the dynamic shifted. She became cautious, calculated, wary of me in a way she had never been before. She stopped talking to him openly, deleted messages, tried to hide the evidence she had left behind. And I felt a strange satisfaction. Not cruel, not vindictive, but righteous. Finally, the scales were tipping in my favor. During this period, I also began reconnecting with friends I had neglected during the fallout. I started opening up about my situation, carefully, to those I trusted. Their support was like medicine, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to suffer in silence. They helped me see that what I was going through wasn't shameful, wasn't my fault, and that I could emerge from this stronger. I also started writing more, filling pages with my anger, my grief, my reflections. I wrote letters to Emily I never sent, emails to myself I never sent, journal entries that bled onto every page of my notebook. It was cathartic, like pouring poison out onto paper instead of into my veins. By July, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Control. Not over Emily, not over her choices, but over myself. Over my actions, my reactions, my future. I realized that the power of turning the tables wasn't in revenge. It wasn't in shaming her or making her suffer. It was in reclaiming my life, my identity, and protecting Sophie from the chaos. And slowly, I began to imagine a life beyond this betrayal. A life where I could breathe again, where Sophie could feel safe, where I could love again, maybe not Emily, but myself at least, and perhaps someday someone else. I knew that the road ahead would be messy. Court dates, custody arrangements, family tensions, emotional scars that might never fully heal. But I was ready. Ready to stand tall, ready to fight for what was right, ready to turn the tables completely and finally put the past behind me. Because for the first time in over a year, I wasn't a victim. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't broken. I was surviving. And surviving, I realized, was just the first step toward thriving. By August 2022, I had officially started the process of separation. Emily moved into a small apartment not far from our house, close enough for Sophie to visit without feeling uprooted. The first few weeks were surreal, coming home to an empty bedroom, walking through quiet hallways, making the bed without her in it. It felt like I was learning to live in my own life again, alone yet not lonely. There was an odd sense of liberation in that emptiness. A strange relief in the silence where her deceit had once screamed at me. The divorce proceedings were slow, but manageable. I'd been meticulous in documenting everything: texts, calls, times she lied, proof of her meetings with Mark. I had a solid case, and my lawyer was thorough. Every time I handed over another piece of evidence, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. Vindication, because I was finally being heard, finally recognized as the one wronged. Sorrow, because this wasn't supposed to be the life we had built. I kept asking myself over and over, how had we ended up here? How had 12 years of marriage, 15 years together, come to this? Through it all, Sophie was my anchor. She was 10 going on 11, wise beyond her years and resilient in ways that amazed me. She adapted surprisingly well, asking questions only when necessary, observing more than she spoke. I made sure to maintain a routine: bedtime stories, weekend trips, Sunday pancakes, so she'd know that life could still be predictable, safe. She still hugged me every morning, still whispered "I love you, Daddy" at night. And that kept me grounded when the emotional weight threatened to crush me. Emily tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for Sophie's sake, but I could see through it. Her attempts to explain her actions to Sophie were awkward, half-hearted, and often contradicted by her behavior. Sophie, of course, noticed. I could see it in the way she'd glance at Emily with a cautious, questioning look, the way she sometimes hesitated before answering her mom's questions. Kids sense everything. They don't forget. And while I hated that Sophie had to navigate this, I also knew she was strong enough to understand. Eventually, Mark became irrelevant in most ways, though he remained a shadow over the past. Emily no longer spoke of him freely, no longer laughed in a way that lit up her face when he was mentioned. I didn't confront him directly. There was no need. My focus was on myself, on Sophie, on the life I wanted to reclaim. In the weeks that followed, I also focused on healing myself. I started therapy, real therapy this time. solo sessions with a counselor who helped me untangle my anger, grief, and sense of betrayal. We talked about trust, boundaries, self-worth, and the complicated feelings that come when someone you love chooses someone else over you. I cried more in those sessions than I had in the past year combined. But it was cleansing, purifying even, because it forced me to acknowledge not just her betrayal, but also my pain, my needs, and my worth. I also rediscovered parts of myself I'd neglected. I returned to hobbies I'd abandoned, like running and photography. I joined a local book club, something small but social, a way to connect with other adults outside the shadow of my marriage. Each small victory, each reclaimed moment of joy, was a step forward. Piece of my life rebuilt brick by November 2022. The legal process was nearing its conclusion. Custody arrangements were finalized. Sophie would live primarily with me, with regular visits to Emily's apartment. Property and finances were divided equitably, though the emotional cost far outweighed the monetary. I remember the final meeting with my lawyer, papers signed, agreements made, and I felt a strange emptiness mingled with relief. The chapter was closing, but the scars would remain. Emily and I didn't speak much afterward. Only the necessary logistics regarding Sophie. The tension had dissipated to a dull hum, like a low engine running in the distance. We existed in the same world, but in separate spheres, no longer intertwined by marriage, only by our daughter. I could see glimpses of the woman I had once loved, the humor, the intelligence, the warmth, but they were fleeting. Ghosts of a past life, impossible to grasp. The first real moment of peace came during a snowy December afternoon. Sophie and I were building a snow fort in the backyard, our breath misting in the cold air. The quiet hum of the neighborhood muffled under a blanket of white. She laughed when a small snowball hit my shoulder, and I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in over a year. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by betrayal. I wasn't consumed by anger or suspicion. I was just a father, playing in the snow with his daughter. That moment, simple and ordinary, was profound. Over the next year, life continued to shift. I started dating again, cautiously, tentatively, aware of the trust issues I carried. The early attempts were awkward, sometimes painful, but also illuminating. I learned to set boundaries, to communicate openly, to trust my instincts. I realized that while Emily had shattered my world, she hadn't destroyed me. I could still love, still feel, still hope. I also started reflecting on forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. I understood that holding on to rage and resentment would only prolong my suffering. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It didn't mean erasing the betrayal or pretending it never happened. It meant releasing the weight so I could move forward. It was a slow process, sometimes requiring conscious effort, but with each passing month, I felt lighter. Freer. By mid-2023, I had rebuilt a life I could be proud of. Sophie thrived, excelling in school, her laughter echoing through our home. I had a new routine, new friendships, and a renewed sense of purpose. Emily remained in the periphery, a reminder of what had been lost, but no longer a force dictating my emotions or actions. I had reclaimed control, not through vengeance, but through resilience, self-respect, and love for my daughter. There were still hard days. Nights when Sophie was asleep and the house was silent, memories of betrayal crept in. Sometimes I would feel a pang of sadness or anger, a fleeting flash of the pain that had once consumed me. But those moments were just that, fleeting. They no longer defined me. I had learned to acknowledge them, accept them, and then let them go. In a way, the betrayal had forced me to confront myself, to examine my values, my needs, my capacity for resilience. I had been forced to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. I had learned that love, while powerful, is not always enough to hold two people together. That trust, once broken, can be repaired, but only with effort and honesty from both sides. And when it can't, survival, dignity, and love for oneself become the guiding lights. One evening in September 2023, as Sophie was curled up on the couch reading a book, I sat by the window, watching the sun set over the Ohio horizon. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and pink, the kind of scene that makes you pause and breathe, a reminder of beauty even after storms. I thought about the year I had survived, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me, and the life I had rebuilt. I felt a sense of quiet triumph, not over Emily, but over the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. I realized that the affair, the deception, the heartache, they had been a crucible. They had tested me, broken me, and ultimately forged a stronger version of myself. I had learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, to prioritize my daughter, and to never lose sight of my own worth. I had learned that love isn't about possession or control, but about honesty, respect, and shared commitment. And when those foundations crumble, it's not failure, it's a chance to start again. I still carry the memories with me, of course. I carry the pain, the anger, the disbelief, and the nights of tears. But I also carry the lessons, the resilience, the clarity that came from surviving something that once seemed insurmountable. I carry Sophie's laughter, her love, and her unwavering faith in me. And I carry a quiet pride, the kind that comes from knowing that I faced betrayal head-on, navigated the wreckage, and emerged intact, stronger, and more aware of my own strength. Life didn't magically become perfect after Emily left. There were challenges, adjustments, and moments of doubt. But those challenges were mine to face, not hers. I had reclaimed my narrative, my choices, and my dignity. And in that reclamation, I found a freedom I hadn't known in years. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I will find love again, or if Sophie and I will eventually have the kind of life I once dreamed of before betrayal entered our world. But I do know this: I am no longer a victim. I am no longer defined by her choices, her deception, or the pain she caused. I am a father, a survivor, a man who has reclaimed his life, and that, in itself, is enough. Sometimes, when Sophie asks why I smile more now, why I seem lighter, I tell her the truth in the simplest way I can: that life can hurt. People can betray you, but you can survive, and in surviving, you can find a new kind of happiness. She nods, her eyes wide and understanding beyond her years, and I realize that my greatest victory isn't in proving Emily wrong, it's in giving my daughter a model of resilience, strength, and integrity. As I sit here now, looking back over the past 2 years, I can finally say I've learned something invaluable. Betrayal can break you, but it doesn't have to define you. You can reclaim your life, rebuild your heart, and emerge stronger than ever. You can survive, and surviving